Okay, so in this video I'm going to actually explain what is happening. I've created this simple app on the watch, and so let's jump first into the interface storyboard. So don't worry too much about this part here at the bottom, which is just related to the notification. Okay, so this is the entry view and is actually the only view that we have inside here. So we have a question label, which it has a predefined height because I do not want that when we have one line text and when we have two line text, the I button, the button move up and down. So I want to have it nice and neat. Okay, so I want to that always the top button here doesn't move up and down. So it has a fixed height. Then we have a table view here, a table view, and each table basically is going to have a row, and or each table is going to have as many rows as we want, as many answers we want to actually show to the user. So what basically we need to do is just we need to have a group. Here we have to have an image for each row, and we want to have a label for each row. At the bottom we have another group which contains the two buttons, which are going to be displayed only from the second question onwards. So as you can see here, we don't want to display the buttons here. So, but then eventually when we are in the second question, we want to display the buttons. Okay. So the only thing that I want to show you inside the WatchKit app, which you are going to use only specifically for the interface itself, the UI, this is where we're going to put all the icons. So all the icons that are appearing on the screen are basically inside over here. You can just click and add them to these assets, and then you can import them later on, and I will show you how to do it. Inside here, I'm going to show you right now the interface controller, and maybe we're going to do another video actually in which I show you the notification controller, and I'm going to show you the complication controller inside here. But let's go step by step. So this step, we're going to look at the interface controller, which is actually it contains all the code of the app. So it's quite long, okay, but I will try to cover it step by step, and I will try to be as clear as possible. So inside here, we import all the necessary packages that we need. For instance, WatchKit and Foundation, I think are kind of default. We need the location, we need the LKit data, so basically heart rate, steps, and so forth. And we are importing watch connectivity because if you have had a look at my previous video, okay, we are passing some data from the iOS app on the phone. We are passing that to the watch, so we need this watch connectivity, and actually it starts straight away here from the top. So here we are actually initiating, like we are start getting this session here. So this session is the same as it was in the iOS app, and we are just initializing it or starting it, importing it, so then we can initialize it and get the data from the iOS app. We are getting user defaults, which are actually, as I showed you before in the iOS app, is where we can save data locally inside our app bundle. So we can always have access to that information. We are importing health store, which there will be a separate video about it, which is this function here that I've created. So this health store will handle all the queries to the health kit, okay? And then the location manager. We are getting all the outlets, so stop, back button, question title, and table view, okay? And here we are creating all the structures as well. So we have question, which will contain is a structure that contains all the information specific to a question. So we want to have a title of the question, we want to have the different options, we want to have the icons that we want to display, we want to allow the programmer to decide which is going to be the next question based on the user's selection. So if he answer one, pick answer 1, maybe we redirect him to question 4. But if you pick answer 2, maybe we redirect him to the next question, which is question 2, just as an example. And then we have an identifier of the question, which is going to be needed when we actually pass the data into influx. We have answer, which will store, this structure will store all the information about the answer of that the participant provided, plus additional information that we are actually gathering, for instance, from the L kit, such as body mass, we are getting the latitude and longitude, we are getting the location timestamp, so when this latitude and longitude was actually measured, and we're getting the heart rate, which is going to be a string. I will go in detail about that in another video. Here are just some default values that we are going to just create. I mean, ideally, maybe we could even remove this one, but for the moment are just here. So they are going to store all the parameters that we are going to actually put inside here the answer. Okay, so for instance, latitude and longitude, we are initializing it at 0, 0. Okay, so you will see that if you get data which are 0, 0, it means that the user completed the survey, so the data have arrived to Influx or whichever database you're using, but the watch did not update these two values. Okay, so in the iOS app we had the function which was viewed it load. Here we have awake, which is practically very similar. Okay, and we have will activate. So will activate is actually run every time the app is actually displayed to the user. So if you are on the phone, just to give a very simple example, so right now it's considered that I went outside from the app. So if I scroll back and I go back here, this function is actually called, so this will activate. Okay, the other one, like this one, awake, is only called the first time the app is actually launched, and I'm not entirely sure then eventually when is actually called again, this function here, awake. Okay, so all the functions that we want to perform every time the user completes a survey are actually going to be called here in the will activate. For instance, we are going to request the location every time the app, so right now I click the now he's actually requesting the location, because I want to ask the location as soon as possible, because it's an asynchronous call. So ideally I'm going to get it as soon as possible, in order that we are going to have the data before the users completes the survey. This is an issue at the moment. It could be fixed or it could be improved. We could make it from an asynchronous call to a synchronous call, in which we are actually waiting before we get the location data, before sending the data to Influx. Okay. So in the awake function here, what do we do? So we try to get the UUID of the phone, of the watch. Okay, so the watch does not, so I was not able to get a unique MAC address, which would have been ideal. The only thing that I was able to get is this UUID, but changes every time the app is launched, so it's practically pointless. Unless we get it only the first time the app is run ever, and then we actually store it in the user defaults. Okay, and that's what I'm actually doing. So I'm trying to read it from the user defaults. So if this function is actually run and is different from null or empty string, it means that the app was run before. If that's not the case, I'm going to get it from the watch. So the first time the watch runs, I'm going to get it and I'm going to save it in the user defaults. Okay, so I'm going to get the participant ID. So if I don't do anything on the phone, so I don't pass this information to the watch, it's going to be initialized as undefined, So this is going to be the first case because in user defaults nothing is saved. But if the section actually work at least once, and we can see inside here, and the phone successfully pushed that information to the watch, okay, we are going to save this participant ID into the user defaults for using this key, okay, and we're actually going to play a bit of vibration on the and a noise and a sound on the watch, okay. So ideally the thing is when the user installs the app for the first time, he clicks that button on the Apple on the iPhone, and then this participant ID is passed to the watch and is stored there forever. If that is not done on the first time and is only done after a certain amount of time, shouldn't be a big issue because as we have done here, we are saving this UUID as if it would be a unique MAC address for that watch. So every time the watch is going to send the data to Influx, even if the user is undefined, we're going to have that unique string. The time that the participant is actually going to send the message from the iOS app, from the phone app to the watch, we are also going to get this ID and we can go backwards because we're going to have all the data into the database with a specific UUID and a user ID which is a participant ID which was undefined, but then at one point we're going to get the unique user ID and then we can cross-check and we know that that device belongs to that specific participant. So here is about the session. So I've already explained this. This is same as on the iOS app, on the iPhone app, and we are just basically activating the session. And here is the difference. So what we are going to do is we are defining the question. So let's go inside define questions, which is actually the most important thing. So for you, because you might want to add a new question. So these are all the questions that are actually appearing on the screen. So is like similar to is just an array, and in each array I'm appending a structure of type question. So what do we need to do? We need to add a title, we need to add the option here, cooler, no change, and warm, which are going to be displayed, so basically the text of the answers. We need to add the icons, and these are the icons that I just showed you before. So thermal preference, cooler, so this is actually has to be exactly the same name. And so let's go back here. So we need to have one icon for each option. If you don't provide the icon, it will actually have an empty icon here, an empty image. And then this is also another important thing to put is the next question. So in this case, so bear in mind, as is written here, that the first question is question 0. So we're counting from 0. So the second question here is going to be question 1, or the index of that question is question 1. If we want to, for instance, make sure that when the user presses cooler, instead of showing the next question, which is where are you, we want to show you are you, indoor, outdoor, we can change the index here. And we need to have this length of this array has to be as long as the options, okay? So let's actually see. I'm just compiling the app here on the to the user. So if I press cooler, as you can see, I'm going to RU, so which is the second, so the third question, but the index of the question is 2. But if instead I'm pressing no change, I'm going to the second question, which is where are you? Okay, so this is extremely powerful because you can implement all the logic that you want. The identifier is going to be the key that is going to be used when I'm going to send the data to Influx, so or any database. So when you're going to send, I'm going to send the data to the database, you will have to define a unique identifier. So you will get thermal preference, and then you get the option that the participant has selected. That's basically it. As I told you, you can add a question with 4 answers, 3 answers, or 2. Doesn't really matter. Could be even 100. I would not recommend to have more than 5 or 6 options, but it's entirely up to you. And another thing is the last question. So it's extremely important that you can change the last question. It doesn't have to be that submit and delete. But the important thing is that it refers to the next question as 999, okay? So technically, you could even have an infinite amount of questions, but this is reserved to end the survey, so this 999, okay? And it's actually up here. So let's see what is actually happening. So define the question, so load the table data. So let's just go step by step. So we have seen the defined question, so we have defined the question. Let's go to load the table data, which is here, okay? So this defines the logic of what happens if the back button was pressed, okay? And if we were ready to, so it just shows us this is the logic of the back button. And this is to hide and show the back and stop button. So if the current question, so we always start from current question equals to 0 because it's the first question that we are actually showing. We don't show the back button and we don't show the stop button. And so if we are in the current question, so inside here, we go to question title and set text, and this is the question title. So inside here, this load table data, okay, you will have to pass the question that you actually want to display, okay? So inside here, in fact, when we do load table data, we are actually passing, sorry, my fault, I didn't explain before, we're actually passing as an input what? We are passing as an input the questions, which we have just defined, defined questions, which we were here, so this is questions, okay? And what we are passing. Which question are we actually passing? We are passing the question with an index equal to the current question, okay? So here we are, current question, and current question is initialized at 0, okay? And back button pressed false, okay? Then we we activate also the location manager. So we define when in used, desired accuracy, and location manager delegate self. This is how you initialize the location manager, okay? So now that I've better explained what this load data table does, let's go back to this load data table, which I didn't explain very well before. So we're accessing the structure that we have defined before. So we're getting from the question that we are passing as an input, we're getting the title, and we are setting it as the question title in the interface storyboard. We are setting the number of rows, which is basically just a count of how many options there are. And for each option, we are actually going to set the text and set the image name, so the icon, okay? So I guess we have did deactivate, there is nothing happening, we'll activate nothing happening. So here we are, so let's go just down here. So this is the function table. So what does this function is very similar to the settings on the iPhone app. And basically this function fires when we select a row. Here, like for instance, right now I'm selecting the first row, and this fires, okay? So what we're going to do? So we know the question that is currently displayed because is from questions, we get, with current question, we get the right question, okay? So the first thing we want to know the ID of the next question that we want to display, okay? And this is very important because in the next questions, again, as you remember, was an array, and we are getting the row index. So if you press answer 0, we are going to go to the relative next question referring to that specific answer. So where we were just here. So we are actually looking at this array here. So if we're pressing 0, we get this 1, 1, and 2. Okay? So that's what we are doing over there. Sorry, I usually don't use these Xcode. I use Upcode, so I'm a bit less familiar on how to navigate. So when we have current question equal to 0, okay, we want to define what was the start time. So what was the start time when the user first pressed on the initial question here. So we want to know when he started the survey. So here we have start time, and we want to add a vote log. Okay, so every time we want to add a vote log equal to plus and equal to 1. Okay, as I can see, this will be changed because this is an error, because practically I'm incrementing the vote log every time a user press on the first question here, but this is wrong because it should be done inside here, only when the user completed the survey. Because if we do it inside here and then the user press stops, the vote log increases, but we are not receiving an answer. Okay, so this actually is going to be fix me move to end of the survey. Sorry for that. So we are adding the response to the temporary array of strings, and we are getting as a key the identifier of the question. So I told you it was very important, and we are actually showing as a response the option. Okay, so it's going to be a string, and then we are updating the current question equal to the next question that needs to be displayed, and we are loading the data table. Okay, so now we are displaying with load data table. We are going to be rendering the next question. This gets called if we don't get inside here. So as I told you before, the last question should have as a next question, because next question update current question, equal to 999. So if that's the case, we are going to do current question equal to 0. Actually, it's bothering me that is up there. I just want to fix it because I just want to show you how it's going to be looking like at the end. So if current question is equal to 999, we are going to reset to current question is equal to 0. We are going to add 1 to the vote log, because this time we actually know that the user has completed the survey, and we are going to send the data to the database. Okay, this is another function, and we are going to clear all the temporary responses, because they are arrays which we are appending, and we don't want to every time send a longer and longer array, so we just remove all, okay, from the questions that we actually have just shown before. So this is how we are going to send the data to the database, and this is basically we are getting the messages, and so what happened. So there is this function here, send data to the database, which is this one here. So we are passing inside that answer that the user has just completed. Okay. So first thing that we need to do, which the answer that gets in is this one here. But first thing that we need to do is to check if there are other answers which are stored in the user defaults in the memory. Because it could be that once the user completes the survey, there is no internet connectivity, or the phone or the watch is not communicating with the phone. So since the watch cannot communicate to the web itself, it needs the phone. It needs the phone to connect. We need to, every time that we fail sending the data, every time we fail the post request, we need to store locally all the answers that the user in the meantime has provided. Okay, so that we are going to do it inside here. Okay, actually inside here we are trying to get and see if there are answers stored from a previous session. Okay, so we're checking if there are answers. If there are, we decode them and we save them inside messages. Okay, so it's going to be an array. We append the answer that just came in. Okay, and we try to send the data. So we loop through that array, okay, because it could be length equal to 1, or it could be more than 1. It depends. It could be more than one element inside that array. And we try to post that message to Influx, okay, or to any database, or to any, actually here we are posting to a Lambda function, or to a HTTP endpoint. So we are encoding the message, that single element of the array. We have tried to send it, and once we have sent it successfully, we actually delete it from that array. Okay? If that array, and we are deleting it here. So we are storing which index message was sent, and then we are deleting it here. Because it could be that the connection is only available for the first two messages. So let's say that the watch was not connected to the phone, and we had the user complete the survey 5 times. Then the user completes the survey another time, so it's the 6th time. Then the connection comes for a certain amount of time. So the watch is able to send 3 of the answers, but not all 6. We want to prevent that all the other 3 are lost. So what we do is we cancel those elements that we have already sent, and we keep in memory the one that have not been sent, and we save them inside here. Okay? So it could be that what we are going to save is actually an empty message, and that's it. So we don't have to worry about it. And then every time the user ends the survey, this loop runs again. So check if there are data message stored, try to send the data, cancel the messages that have been sent, and that's it. This is the location manager. Nothing much to say about here, which is just actually getting the data and the location. So it gets the location, and this is just a pretty simple function. And then we have so inside here location manager, and then we have back button and stop button inside here. So if we go to back button, we want to go back to the previous question that we just answered, and there is a bit of I mean, it's not complex, but there is an array question displayed which stores in memory the flow that the user went through. Because as I told you, it could be that based on a specific answer, the user gets redirected to another question. So we cannot go back to the previous index because it could be that we jump one question. As in the example I showed you before, from question 0, we jump to question number 2. So we cannot go back of 1 and go to question 1, because if the user press back, then we'll be prompted with a question that he hasn't seen before, and that is an unwanted behavior. So we have these questions displayed, which stores all the questions that were displayed to the user, and then we have this stop button, which actually simply just stop and reset everything. Okay? So I believe that practically is all for the interface controller, and in the next video I'm going to show you a bit about the complication, health store, so if you want to get more data, and the notification controller is going to be much quicker video this time.